But what I can do is I can just, I mean, I'm not really sure what you want. I know you emailed me and you talked about Will.
Yes.
And you said that he was put me on some sort of, explained a little bit about 5,000 towers being stopped, etc. And when I saw that, I went, "Oh, hang on,
Yeah,
it was only 2,500. It wasn't 5."
Slight exaggeration.
Even though it was nice. It was
Yes.
nice of him to say that, but I guess I haven't really been working with Will. I may be somewhere around the trap, but I think he was merely reporting on what was going on here.
Yes.
And I guess that's so I can get you all up to speed.
Okay.
Let you know what's been happening.
Okay, thank you.
So hopefully I'll enlighten you all a bit as to what 5G actually really is, and sort of enlighten you a bit on what I've done and with other communities around the country and also around the world, so you'll get a bit of an understanding of what's really happening
around the world.
Well, a good start is to tell us a bit about what 5G maybe as an introduction, and
Okay. Now I don't know if I can share. Yes, I can share my screen, which is great. So what I'm going to do is just, I guess where I come from is I'm actually a barrister based in Tasmania, and I've been working for about 6 years, or just over 6 years, on EMR issues, which is electromagnetic radiation. And I started off with one client who I thought, what, this lady's allergic to the 20th century. I didn't understand what this was about. And when I took her on, I listened to her very carefully and started to realise there's some truth in this, as there's truth in everything. And so what I did is I really investigated her issue, got her diagnosed by a doctor, and fair enough, what was coming out was real. And I then did some court cases involved with her, and then all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, thousands of people started contacting me, not only in Australia, but around the world, wanting for me to help them. And that's when I realised this is not an isolated case. Now it's got to the point where we've got about 150,000, possibly 170,000 on Facebook groups now, just in Australia alone. It's become massive around the world, and you only have to Google EMR or 5G and you'll see where that's all heading. So where did I come into it? I guess I looked very carefully at the law, and I worked out ways in which to stop this. And I guess the best way to explain it is I could see it as being like an assault, technically, on people. And the best way to explain it would be, if I was, it's a bit like what is a tower for, okay? And a tower's main purpose is to irradiate electromagnetic radiation from their land onto your land, okay? And that's really the whole purpose of these towers. Now, I then realised that non-ionising electromagnetic radiation is actually classed as a pollutant in some states. So in essence, I could see that they were contaminating people with this radiation, and a lot of it was without people's consent. And then I realised that it technically classed as an assault under various provisions around Australia, and that's basically where I started. So I've managed to do things like peace and good behaviour orders, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go through, and I might just share some of my PowerPoints, and I'll just go through them, if I may.
Yes, please.
Sorry about my dog. He's never normally like this, but I don't know if you can just bear with me. Am I sharing this at the moment? I don't think I am.
I know.
But just bear with me.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes.
There you go.
See anything there? Okay.
Right.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just explain. I'm trying to get my PowerPoint presentation right. So I won't share it at the moment. I'm just getting used to this technology. Just bear with me. Is that sharing at the moment, or it's not?
Yeah, we can see it.
It is. We can see it.
It is sharing. And what I'll do is I'll just show you some of my successes and what I've done in the past, so you'll get an idea of where I'm coming from. Okay.
Yes, we can see it now.
You can see that?
Yes,
okay.
we can. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do is well, that's me. You can see there I'm a barrister, so I'm not fucking around. That's really me. This is I guess you could say a motion against Telstra, which was in the Sutherland Shire Council. Now, what I do is I convince councillors and entire councils to stop developments, and this is a good example of what I've done here. In the Sutherland Shire Council, I used medical reports, and I also used my legal advice, which was then handed to the councillors. I did public meetings, and then from that, I then had negotiations with councils, and then just to explain to them the dangers of this stuff and what's involved, and their criminal and civil liability. And what happens is that they all agree unanimously to stop certain things. So this is a good example of what we did in Sutherland Shire Council, which was in New South Wales. And you can see there the councillors have met with residents from the 3 suburbs. So I had 3 separate clients from 3 separate suburbs, and we're out there to stop it. So now what happened from that, and you'll see here is a letter from Telstra, and it was a organisation called Metasite, which was their PR company. And you'll see here, this is a letter from the CEO of the Sutherland Shire Council saying that they object to the development. Okay, so that's one letter, and this one here was for Lillypilly in the suburb of Sutherland Shire. This one's for Engadine, and this is the next one for Carilla. So you can see these letters. This is evidence that the council didn't want the development based on what I've been doing. Okay. Now, the next one we'll go to Wilson's Creek, which is in Byron Shire. And what I did there, you can see there that there was a lot of people protesting against a Telstra tower. They decided to engage me, and I turned up in a meeting at the Mullumbimby Hall, and I gave a very good talk in regards to the legal liabilities, in regards to civil, criminal, etc. I then put a team together. You can see here I've got there's 3 of us. There's myself, there's Dr. Russell Cooper, who's an amazing man, by the way, and a lot of my work is based on him. And then we also have Victor Leach, who's a physicist. So these are my experts, so to speak, that I use to bring the towers down, so to speak. Okay. Now, we met at Mullumbimby there at that particular time. And here we go. We're now out in front of the council chambers. We convinced the entire council again, and you can see there the Wilson Creek Tower was rejected by council. So we had another win. Okay, so that was Wilson's Creek. Now, there's a little bit more about the tower being rejected there. Now, this one here is was when I was in the basically around the Gold Coast area in Queensland, and this one was in the current Currumbin Valley. And again, we had another Telstra tower, and I met with, there's about 300 people at that rally. You just can't see it, but that's what it was. And really the council that we had to convince here was the Gold Coast City Council. So the reality was, it's okay. I met with the community. I also had some dialogue with the council, and lo and behold, we won. Okay, and so there we stopped basically convinced the entire Gold Coast City Council that that tower causes adverse health effects to all the people in the community. So that's really what that's about. Then we go to the next one, which was the Coogee Residences Incorporated. Now, this was a very interesting case. Now, this one was basically on Dundas Street, and there was a doctor that was on Dundas Street who they were going to put a small cell facility right in front of, about 6 metres from his child's bedroom. That unfortunately for TPG, that was the company involved. TPG was, how could I explain it, the instigators behind this. Unfortunately for them, there were actually 8 doctors that lived on that street, not just the one. And what I did, or what the committee did, or the community did, is they organised with the news to come along, and you can see here there's a few doctors there talking about the issue in regards to irradiating their families with electromagnetic radiation. The interesting thing is that when this is in doctors' back doors, they realise that, well, this is not good. It got a lot of coverage in the media, okay, so there's a lot of community pressure based on this. They engaged me, and I obviously gave an advice, and I used my experts, which you saw, which was Victor Leach and also Dr. Cooper. And we attended a rally where there was a community meeting, and all the doctors turned up. also some other doctors, and we also had the opposition, which was TPG, and they had my legal opinion, and that convinced them that, whoops, they better pull the pin. And here you can see here, we invited some councillors at that meeting, and this one was a Greens councillor who called for the suspension of the rollout of small cell facilities across the Randwick city. It's the Randwick Council unanimously to object to the actual development. But unbeknownst to everybody else at Dundas Street, I had 30 other communities around Australia who were also objecting to TPG in various forms and guises, so to speak. So my legal opinion was based not just on this, but also on the entire network. Then TPG, you'll see here, this is a press statement from Randwick City Council saying that TPG small cell towers will not roll out. Now, I'll just go back a bit. Now, just to let you know how this worked, TPG had already set up 900 small cells across the country. So they were already established and already placed up. They also had another 1,200 that they were going to install. So all up, it was around, I think it was about 2,500 small cells that I managed to stop in one go. That was the entire country. Now, TPG, there was a bit of a claim around it, a buzz around it, saying it wasn't myself that stopped it on health grounds. It was based on, I guess you could say, the Huey ban. And you've probably heard that Huey has been banned not only in the US, but also in Australia. Well, that's correct. That is true. But the real reason TPG pulled out was because of the pressure that we'd be placing on TPG in regards to health. So there was a bit of controversy going around at the time, but thankfully I was vindicated. And you'll see here, this is the Sydney Morning Herald. Basically, one of the executive officers in court actually admitted that TPG claims had abandoned its mobile network due to health fears. And if you read the first part there, you'll see they scrapped their entire mobile network following community pressure. And this was this particular case that TPG gave evidence in is where they're with Vodafone, and it was a $15 billion merger that was in jeopardy over this. Okay, now if I look at the next page, you'll see that this is a QC talking or cross-examining the executive, and his name was Mr. Levy, the executive of TPG. And this is the interesting part. You'll see here Mr. Hodge shot back saying, "You don't think there is any scientific rationale for this, do you?" Now, Mr. Levy replied, it was not his area of expertise. And then Mr. Levy then said the equipment that we were using was well within the standard and is very much acceptable in terms of the standards. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though TPG had followed the standards, the Australian standards, and followed their equipment as the safety standards that was produced around the country, it didn't work for them. Okay, so if we read the next one, it says, Hodgson said there was some segment of the community that held an irrational concern about the effects of small cells. Now, Mr. Levy responded and said, I wouldn't call it irrational. I think people had rational concerns. Now, so as you understand what I mean by this and what they're talking about, is the rationality behind it was because I used experts. I used Dr. Cooper, for example, to give a medical opinion. And in his opinion, it posed an extreme risk of harm to health to the people in that community that were going to be exposed to these small cells. That's how it became rational, if that makes sense. An irrational concern would be if somebody just looked on the internet and worked it out for themselves without any expert opinion and basically gave their objection to the developer or to TPG. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that the way to stop towers and to stop any issue is to use experts, if that makes sense. So that's really what I did. Now, to give you a bit of an overview, if you wanted to get some idea of how I did it and how to put it all together, I've put this there's a tiny little website here called EMR Legal Education. Now, I'd suggest if you have time to have a look at that, and you'll see there it is. It's emrlegaleducation.com. Now, this is set up specifically for, I don't know if have you ever heard of Josh DeSol before? Have any of you heard of him before? Well, he's an American award-winning documentary filmmaker, and he put together what was called the part of it. It was called the 5G Awareness and Accountability Summit, and there were 40 experts from around the world that gave talks in this summit. I was on the billing with Robert Kennedy Jr. I don't know if you've heard of him. That's Robert Kennedy's son. We also had, and he's an attorney, a very, particularly in the anti-vax campaign in the US. And we also had Magda Davis, another Martin Paul, and all these really top-regarded experts, and I was one of them. Apparently I had about 225 hits, 225,000 hits on the summit. And what you have here are the two videos. There's 1 hour each, and I suggest if you've got time, to watch both of them. Okay, and you'll see on the left, it's just sort of giving you an overview. The one on the right will give you a step-by-step process. Now, this is where I give us a step-by-step process on how to prepare your evidence for litigation and the potential remedies that are available to people. Okay. And I also have what we call a warning objection notice, which will assist people as well. Now, I also have some redacted medical opinions that were used in my campaigns, I guess you could say. And so that sort of gives a bit of a breakthrough or breakdown as to how doctors do their work. And very good if you want to take this to your own doctor to show them and say, look, hey, doctor, have a look at this. What do you think? Is this dangerous? I've got another medical opinion that might assist you in some way to get you up to speed with how things are really progressing in that field. Now, what I'm going to do now, are you guys familiar with 5G?
Yeah. Awesome.
Do you know what 5G actually is?
Millimeter wave technology.
It's millimeter wave technology. That's correct. But do you know anything more about it? What have you been told by what you've been seeing on TV and what you've been seeing everywhere? Do you actually really understand what it is?
Sasha Stone movie showed it was used for crowd dispersal.
That's correct, with the active denial system and those sorts of things. That's correct. All right. So when you looked at Sasha Stone's, the apocalypse, what's it called? 5G, the apocalypse, the extinction event. Strongly recommend you watch that, because that's exactly where I'm going. But there's more to it that I've revealed that will make you aware, and I guess that's really what you guys are all about, isn't it? About consciousness and being aware and that sort of stuff. Am I right?
Yeah,
definitely. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, I won't talk about this because this is a bit of waffle, but what I'll do is, this is Victoria in particular. I'm going to let you have a little bit of understanding. This is what's called the Interpretation of Legislation Act, and I'll get into the 5G in a minute, so I'll just talk about this. This is about assault, so you understand it.
Right.
You'll see here the definition. So this basically is an Interpretation of Legislation Act, which basically means it applies to all legislation throughout Victoria. So these little bits that says, okay, Act means an Act passed by the Parliament of Victoria. Attorney General means the Attorney General Victoria. It's really just a definition, and it sort of just gives you a bit of a breakthrough as to what all the acts are saying. Now, if we keep going down the page, you'll see where I've highlighted person. Can you see that? Now, you'll notice there that a person includes a body politic or corporate as well as an individual. So when an act actually mentions a person, they're actually referring also to a body corporate and to a person. And to a body politic. Now, body politic would be something like a council or some elected sort of body. You would find a body corporate, which is a company, etc., as well as an individual, which is you and I. Now, if we have a look under the Crimes Act in Victoria, you'll see under Section 31 there, you can see there it says, 1, a person. So a person would include a body corporate a body politic, and an individual. A person who assaults or threatens to assault another person with intent to commit an indictable offence. So that's what it's really trying to tell us. It's saying, okay, what is assault? Now, if we keep going down to subsection 2, you'll see at the top, you'll see 1, I haven't highlighted, but I go down to 2. Assault means the direct or indirect application of force by a person to the body of, or to clothing or equipment worn by another person, where the application is without lawful excuse. Now, when we say without lawful excuse, that means I don't consent to it. Do you understand that? So if I say, yes, you can do it, then that's fine. But when I say, when I don't consent, then we have without lawful excuse. And the next bit you'll see that it says with intent to inflict or being reckless as to the infliction of bodily injury, pain or discomfort, damage, insult or deprivation of liberty. Now, the bit I like in this is the word discomfort. You see that? So it's not a very high threshold, is it? So in essence, if somebody applies force that causes me some form of discomfort, then it's technically an assault. Now, and you'll see that also damage, and I'll talk about damage in a minute, okay? And results in the infliction of any such consequence, whether or not the consequence inflicted is the consequence intended or foreseen. So in essence, what it means is if they didn't really intend to do it, it's still technically an assault. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's find out what application of force actually is. And there it is, in subsection 3 of the same section, includes application of heat, light, electric current, or any other form of energy. Now, electromagnetic radiation is also known as electromagnetic energy. It's a form of electricity and magnetic fields, and it's known as electromagnetic energy. Okay, so there it is. All right, so in essence, by using the criminal code, I can show that if somebody applies force against my person without my consent and it causes me a form of discomfort, then that's assault. And you'll see here that we have, under the Victorian law, we have what's called the Personal Safety Intervention Orders Act of 2010, and it also has a definition of assault there, and it says exactly the same thing. Okay, if we go down to subsection 3, pretty much everything I just said to you. And you'll see there, 3, it says application of heat, light, electric current, or any other form of energy. Okay? So what is a personal safety intervention order? Does anyone know?
No.
Okay, it's a restraint order. It's basically to stop someone from assaulting me or threatening to assault. If we go back, assault means the direct, okay? It also means you can threaten to do it. So you don't actually have to have done it, but you can threaten to do it. And this is from the Magistrates Court of Victoria. You can see you have a personal safety intervention orders, which you can issue against a person, which includes a body corporate. Okay? And that's the form itself. Okay? And that's how you fill it out. And basically, if we have a look at it, it says this. It says this: has the respondent assaulted, sexually assaulted, made serious threats towards you, or damaged or interfered with your property, that this is prohibited behaviour? Has the respondent behaved in a way that has caused you to fear for your safety by engaging in stalking conduct? So when they talk about stalking conduct with regards to threat and that sort of stuff. So very interesting stuff. And that's what can be used in Victoria to stop towers. Okay? Now, this is where we come from, where it's what we call a public or a common nuisance. And if you have a look at these particular cases, you'll see that it's particularly R and Ward. It says that it is no justification that the inconvenience caused by it is less than the public benefit derived from its existence. So what that means is this: is the public benefit doesn't count if one person is being harmed. Does that make sense? So if just one person is being harmed, forget about the public benefit, Those cases right as early as 1836 and then backed up in the High Court in McClellan Rider. So in essence, we have case law that says, hey, you'll hear a lot of people saying, oh, but aren't mobile phones for the public benefit? Aren't towers for the public benefit? Nah, sorry. You're harming, you've got to stop, right? And this is a good example of what a nuisance is. You'll see someone's burning smoke next door. It goes over the fence and it's creating a nuisance. One thing you'll find in law is that nuisance is when, and we'll read this a little bit here, it says private nuisance occurs when somebody substantially unreasonably interferes with or disturbs someone else's ordinary and reasonable use of the land they own or occupy, and the interference occurs without direct entry into the person's land. Nuisance can be used to address some environmental concerns, including interference with enjoyment of property caused by dust, noise, vibration, sewage, odour, light, and the flow of water, etc., etc. So the best way to explain it to you is this, is that when you own your land or tenant your land, you purchased a right, and the right you had is a long, and that's the right that you buy. No one ever actually owns land. It's owned by the Crown. But what you purchase from the Crown is a right to occupy that land. The right that you have is to occupy from the interference of your neighbour. Now, your neighbour so much as interferes with your enjoyment of your land, that becomes a nuisance. All right? And that's exactly how I target the telcos. Now, you also have public nuisance. Now, this is an interesting one because this is where councils get involved. Public nuisance occurs when a person causes a nuisance which endangers the life, health, property, or comfort of the public generally, or obstructs the public in the exercise of its rights. And as I just said to you before, they have a right to the quiet enjoyment of their land. So the essence of the public nuisance is substantial and unreasonable interference with rights common to the general public. Okay? Unlike private nuisance, it is not a requirement that the public nuisance must impact on the use and enjoyment of land. But in this case, it's in regards to health. So if there's a health risk that's been raised, then public nuisance will apply, and your councils must abate it if they're convinced that there is a health risk. If that makes sense. Okay. Now, this is the Public Health and Wellbeing Act in Victoria, and you'll see here that we have what we call the functions of councils. And the function of a council under this act is to seek to protect, improve and promote public health and wellbeing within the municipal district by, and you can see all these ones here, but let's have a look at D. Developing, enforcing up-to-date public health standards and intervening if the health of people within the municipal district is affected. You see that? Mm-hmm. They have a duty to do this. And if we look at the next one, it makes it very clear they have one. Under the section 60, it says the duty of a council has a duty to remedy as far as reasonably possible all nuisances existing in its municipal district. So as you can see, I'm not just saying this, I'm actually applying the law, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And once councils are aware of this, they then go, oh, okay. Now if you have a look at this, there is an offence of causing a nuisance. So a person must not cause a nuisance or knowingly allow or suffer a nuisance to exist on or emanate from any land owned or occupied by that person. So the telco in this instance owns the or occupies a particular piece of land to emit the radiation. But what also happens, which councils to their horror, they own the land too. So council land is where they allow these towers to be constructed. Well, it's the council that are also in offence under a nuisance provision. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it's actually an offence. Now, this is an interesting one. If the council does not, within a reasonable time, have been notified of an alleged nuisance, investigate the subject matter of the notification, the person who notified the council may apply to the magistrate's court and actually prosecute that nuisance. So what this means is if the council are the ones that are creating the nuisance because they're the owner of the land, we can simply go straight into the magistrate's court under this provision under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act and take the council to task.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's also the telco. So I'm just giving you a very basic overview of what the law can do. Now, this is what we call an abatement of public nuisance. A council may abate a public nuisance. Abate means to stop. It's an order from the council. They say, hey, and they issue it and say, hey, you must stop, blah, blah, blah. So you can see here, it's to order responsible for a public nuisance to abate it. Now, it's a bit awkward when it's themselves that are doing it. So that's where I really make them realise they're in a little bit of a pickle. Now, there are reasons that, so not only have we got this particular issue, but we also have a thing called the tort of misfeasance in public office. Now, if they don't do as they're told, you can sue them for damage. Now, when I say damage, if your doctor says that you're going to be extreme risk of harm to health and the nuisance is not abated, then my clients have to abandon their home because the home is contaminated. We have damage. So therefore you can sue for contamination of your home, that it's uninhabitable. You can't live in there anymore. Okay, so you can see